With Tears of the Kingdom behind us and the Switch 2 on the horizon, it's time to look forward. While Breath of the Wild and its sequel gave us vast worlds to explore, I think the next Zelda game could learn something crucial from Majora's Mask: how to make that world feel alive through its NPCs. Now let me explain. While Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom gave us two different versions of this gigantic world to explore with a level of freedom never before experienced in a Zelda game, Majora's Mask gave us people to care about. Majora's Mask has excelled at one thing more than any other game in the franchise, and that's an immersive experience by using its own NPCs as the catalyst. Now, don't get me wrong, the next Zelda game doesn't need to go backward, but it should learn one key thing from the past: how to make its world feel alive through its NPCs. Now, I fully understand that when you compare Majora's Mask to these games, it's truly an apples to oranges scenario, but I invite you to join me in considering that while Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, in which I will commonly refer to in this video as the Calamity Era games, are both masterpieces in their own right, I believe that shifting this focus could make the next installment even better. When you are first introduced to Clocktown, it doesn't take you long to realize that while compact, it has a deeply human feel to it. NPCs weren't just there for the background, they were the emotional core of the game. And as you progress through the opening chapter of the game, you learn that Clocktown is brought to life through their schedules, their routines, motives, actions. You see a mysteriously masked child in the opening moment of the dawn of the first day that's going to that mailbox, and that letter that he is mailing comes with genuine motivations. The construction workers are working hard to get ready for an upcoming festival, but it progressively gets more difficult because the hired hands are fleeing for their lives from the imminently crashing moon above. The bomber gang patrols Clocktown while maintaining a secret code, and they track events and rumors around town. And you have a thief that robs the elderly lady on the first night that directly impacts on if the bomb shop gets stock available or not. And Andrew, who manages the stock pot inn, struggles because of her missing fiancé. And these are just a few of the characters that make Clocktown feel emotionally impactful. And you develop this connection to where you genuinely care about what happened to them. And many of these NPCs have strong arcs that they go through depending on your actions during this 3-day cycle, and their lives are deeply impacted by player intervention. Ignoring their problems causes these NPCs to suffer or fail, and there's an emotional depth to them where they will display complex emotions of grief, denial, love, regret, in which at the time was very rare for a video game. And the connections to these characters is what makes me continue to come back to it even after all these years. When Breath of the Wild released, it changed what you thought about Zelda games forever. And why wouldn't it? Hyrule is beautiful, and there are countless videos on YouTube that can break down the massive scope that these games put on display. I myself spent hundreds of hours across this game and its sequel with an appetite for exploration that continued to be satiated with so many interesting locations and puzzles and enemies. It was a grand adventure that I would gladly wipe my own brain to allow to re-experience all over again. Now, despite the enormous scale of these games, I do feel, however, that the towns that inhabit this world have a tendency to be somewhat empty in ways that matter. Now, before you get angry at me, hear me out. I do realize that the emptiness is part of the world-building design of the games. Breath of the Wild tells you a story of this broken world deeply impacted by Calamity Ganon 100 years before. People have resettled, but many lives were lost, and the land is overrun by monsters. Tears of the Kingdom's world tells you a story of how the people of Hyrule are finally starting to rebuild just a little at a time. The towns of the Calamity Era games definitely reflect this, and while these games do wonders in environmental storytelling, it still lacks emotionally impactful NPCs that help tell that story. The towns come off as static in comparison to the likes of Clocktown, and some of these towns or settlements might have notable NPCs such as Pyrrha, Sidon, or Cass that are indeed charming in their own right, but outside of their roles in either the narrative or side quest, I don't believe they offer very much beyond the surface. But really, this point isn't about them. I think about the more notable improvements that can be made with the NPCs that we find in places like the stables, or wandering the roads leading to and through the villages, or maybe even running trading posts. And while they have somewhat of a routine, their purpose is related to the world around you. The regional NPCs, such as let's say the Gorons or the Zora, also exists to basically tell you about the world or give you hints about a surrounding quest. Now, I believe this was intentional because in these games, the world itself is the primary storyteller, as to where Majora's Mask makes the NPCs take center stage, with the world complementing it. They have very limited dialogue, and it comes off sometimes as they're made to be lore vehicles, rather than people with lives, families, careers, dreams, or motivations. To transition here, there's definitely a difference in each of these games' strengths when it comes to making the player feel the stakes of each of Link's adventures. In the Calamity era games, I was most emotionally invested in the story between Link and Zelda. Patricia Summerset, who voices Zelda in these games, does a fantastic job at portraying a young woman who cares about her people despite the burden that she carries as the Princess of Hyrule. She learns how to be a leader and is even willing to sacrifice her own life if that means the well-being of Hyrule. Unfortunately, it seems to be where most of the emotional stakes are found in this story. To be fair, there are other bright spots in the characters for sure that do feel heartfelt, but I don't think Link gets appropriate interaction with them that translates to the player. When I played as Link, I wanted to save Zelda. The motivation for the player was easy to find. I wanted to find her, I wanted to help her. I really just wanted to help Link accomplish what was a very obvious desire of his in protecting her as her sworn knight. These emotional stakes propel the narrative forward in a meaningful way. At the same time, when the world ends in Majora's Mask, it's impactful because the world didn't just end, but you failed to save Anju, Kafei, Cremia, Romani, the Bomber Gang boys, the Postman, or Madame Aroma. On the other hand, it's almost as if most of the towns of post-Calamity Hyrule are more abstract in nature, seemingly disconnected from the rest of the world. I always had this feeling that these towns were more meant to pass through rather than to live in. There's one obvious exception in these games, however, and that's Terry Town. It's a beautiful quest line where Link helps recruit and build a community of outcasts or outliers as they find a new home. The Terry Town quest line is a beautiful picture of new beginnings and unity in a dark world seeking to start over. I would love if we had more of these kinds of quest lines in future Zelda games. Speaking of that, I have an idea, or more so a hope, that I would love to see realized in the next Zelda game. As I've already mentioned, I don't believe the Zelda franchise should move backwards. I believe the open world formula is here to stay. As I've watched the Nintendo treehouses related to the release of the new Nintendo Switch 2 and the upgraded hardware it will have, I can't help but dream a little. If I were to imagine a next step for the series, I would love to see a Zelda world where every village is its own Majora's Mask style ecosystem, evolving as you play. Obviously, you would not have the 3-day time clock, but what you could have is a few different individual towns with longer arching quest lines of their own. As Terry Town had a massive, emotionally resonant storyline that fits within the world, but yet is separated from the overarching narrative, so too could multiple other towns across Hyrule. Imagine that each town had their own systems of unique NPCs with interconnected relationships, rivalries, and personal stakes. As you accomplish things in the world, maybe it impacts the trade route or population of a town in a tangible way. Each town you could spend significant time in as subplots unravel and you get to know characters more intimately. Imagine solving a dilemma at Death Mountain and Goron is able to make new trade routes of ore, which then impacts another town several days later as the town celebrates new jobs being created. Maybe several in-game days later you hear talks of the town wanting to open a new shop because of the demand. The town becomes more vibrant and houses get new paint jobs because of the impact one event has made on the town's economy. Maybe then that opens up a new section of quest lines of characters you've already gotten to know. Of course, I know that I'm not a game developer and games are very hard to make, but with the advantages of technology and how Nintendo loves to take their time making sure they get a game right, a man can't help but dream. So what do you think? What do you hope for in the next Zelda game? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. I adore this series, and I know whatever they come up with, I'm going to be excited about. The next Zelda doesn't need to abandon its freedom. Freedom made Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom legendary, but emotional connection made Majora's Mask unforgettable. The next Zelda game doesn't have to choose. I believe it can do both. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.